The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Ever since the inclusion of the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, the American people's salient right to protest has been protected. Throughout American history, this protection of civil disobedience has been exhibited, whether it be brought upon by feelings surrounding civil rights, women's suffrage, gun reform, or anti-war. All the movements throughout American history that have caused civil disobedience had one common purpose: to create one prevailing voice to fight for what they believe in hopes of enacting change. Together, they coalesce to form the identity of what it means to be an American.
Protest is defined as a physical act of dissent. The act of civil disobedience is sparked by the need for systemic change. It is usually aimed at politicians or government officials in response to laws and measures, or lack of.
I am for dissent because, as I look back over the 190-year history of this country, as I'm sure you have as a student at Ann Arbor, I find that dissent is the great instrument of change. It's the instrument of progress. And that's what really distinguishes a free society from the totalitarian societies. We change those things by reason of the dissent that are wrong. We aren't frozen into them.
A protest is important as the freedom of religion or the freedom of the press. It's one of the basic tenets of the freedoms of our country.
According to a Gallup poll, 1 in 3 Americans have felt a strong urge to protest. Civil disobedience is an integral tool that is frequently used to engender change. Its use can be dated back to the American Revolutionary War, in which the Sons of Liberty protested taxation without representation in an event known as the Boston Tea Party. The act of protesting continued throughout history, and another impactful and influential example of this is women's suffrage. Claudia Bryant in Women's Suffrage remarks on how women historically had been a part of social movements, and how their participation and involvement in those movements helped form their own. At the time, women were not equal to men and wanted more rights, especially the right to vote. This was the main goal of the women's suffrage movement. Elizabeth Fow in The Emergence of Modern America recalls how influential Carrie Chapman Catt, the president at the time of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, was in helping women achieve suffrage. In 1900, women were only allowed to vote in 4 states: Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and Idaho. By 1910, she helped women gain the right to vote in Washington State and California. Even through opposition of anti-suffragists, she was able to incite a change through protest and proposing a federal amendment allowing women the right to vote by 1919.
Women using their voices to incite a change continues to be prevalent in American society. Movements such as the #MeToo, which aim to highlight and thwart sexual violence, to Time's Up, that focuses to end impartiality in the workforce, to the Women's March, which aims to transform societal rules.
I think the Me Too movement is a good thing. I think women should speak up for themselves about being badly treated.
Brian Frederick and Matthew Streb in Civil Rights Movement discuss the history of the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement began in the early 1900s with little protests such as the creation of the NAACP and later the desegregation of schools with the Supreme Court ruling of Brown versus Board of Education. However, it did not become popular until Rosa Parks made the headlines for refusing to give up her bus seat to a white passenger. Parks was arrested, which triggered an outrage in Montgomery, leading to the creation of the bus boycott and other protests by prominent civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. Other parts of the South started following suit with protests like sit-ins at restaurants to protest segregation. Committees were created to help the civil rights movement grow. The movement gained support from presidents, and although the movement had some issues gaining the support of the majority of Congress at first, the movement eventually gained enough support and caused incredible amounts of change.
A significant event of the civil rights movement was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, in which Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech.
Because of him and his fellow marchers, barricades began to fall and bigotry began to fade. Laws changed, but so did hearts and minds. New doors of opportunity swung open for each new generation.
The March on Washington occurred at the National Mall, which has since been an iconic staple for influential social movements, such as the anti-war movement that was created to fight several aspects about America's involvement in the Vietnam War, the National March for Lesbian and Gay Rights that was initiated to fight for LGBTQ rights, and the March for Our Lives movement, which was established to promote gun policy reformation.
Being a minor, I can't really vote to show my voice or to be civically active. So marches are a good way to show what you're passionate about and what you want to change in our country.
Today, a prevalent issue is gun violence. According to a Gallup poll, because of the recent occurrence of school shootings, 35% of parents express fear for their children's safety at school, and 20% of students express fear for their own safety when attending school. The prevalence of school shootings has caused concern and outrage among American citizens, and the most recent school shooting, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas shooting, in which 17 lives were taken, has sparked the March for Our Lives movement. The movement, which was created by the students of Stoneman Douglas, was created in hopes of reforming gun policies to prevent further gun violence. Nevertheless, there are individuals who believe that protesting is not the only way to use your voice to enact change. Educating others, voting, donating money, and participating in local town hall meetings are other means of using your power as an American citizen to fight for what you believe in and create change. Some think the act of protest is dangerous and should be avoided as well. Unlike many other countries whose people's freedoms are still being oppressed, the United States of America ensures its people have the freedom to voice their opinions and express their beliefs. Ultimately, what it means to be an American is using your constitutional right of protest to fight for the changes you want to see.